In the violent underworld of 1970s New York, loyalty was supposed to be everything. The Mafia prided itself on rules, hierarchy, and a strict code that had survived for generations. But every so often, someone appeared who was so reckless, so unpredictable, that even hardened gangsters began to fear him. His name was Thomas DeSimone. To the outside world, he was just another street criminal connected to the powerful Lucchese crime family. Yet, inside the mob, he had a reputation that made grown men uneasy. Witnesses later claimed he could go from joking and laughing to deadly rage in seconds. And when that rage surfaced, people sometimes didn't walk away alive. By the time he reached his 20s, rumors suggested he had already participated in multiple murders, each one adding to the myth forming around his name. Friends described him as charming and fearless. Enemies described him as a ticking time bomb. His story would later inspire the terrifying character Tommy DeVito in the film Goodfellas. But the real-life figure was, according to many accounts, even more dangerous than the movie version. How did a young man from the streets of New York City become one of the most feared associates in Mafia history? And more importantly, how did someone so violent rise so quickly before suddenly disappearing without a trace at just 28 years old? The answers begin with a childhood shaped by crime, family connections, and a world where power often came from the barrel of a gun. Thomas DeSimone was born in 1950 in New York City, a place where the influence of organized crime could be felt in many neighborhoods during the post-war decades. Unlike outsiders who stumbled into the Mafia world later in life, DeSimone grew up in an environment where connections to the underworld already existed inside his own family. His brother, Anthony DeSimone, had ties to criminals associated with the powerful Lucchese crime family, one of the notorious 5 families of New York. In those neighborhoods, young men were constantly exposed to a culture where quick money, intimidation, and loyalty to powerful figures could elevate someone from poverty to influence almost overnight. For a teenager like DeSimone, the path into crime did not feel unusual. It felt almost inevitable. Friends from his early years later described him as confident, charismatic, and fearless, traits that could attract attention in the wrong circles. But those same people also noticed something darker beneath the surface, an explosive temper that could turn ordinary arguments into violent confrontations. By the time he was still a teenager, DeSimone had already begun committing small crimes such as car theft, street robberies, and cargo theft. Activities that were common entry points for young men trying to prove themselves to organized crime figures. His natural boldness quickly caught the attention of older mob associates who saw potential in someone willing to take risks others avoided. One of the most important turning points came when DeSimone began spending time with rising criminal figures like Henry Hill and the feared mob associate Jimmy Burke, both deeply connected to operations surrounding John F. Kennedy International Airport. What began as small jobs soon evolved into larger crimes, and as DeSimone grew older, his reputation started to change. He was no longer seen as just another reckless street kid. He was becoming something far more dangerous, a young man whose willingness to use violence could open doors inside the ruthless hierarchy of the American Mafia. As Thomas DeSimone entered his early 20s, his involvement with the crew surrounding Jimmy Burke and Henry Hill began to pull him deeper into the machinery of organized crime operating around John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. At the time, the airport had become one of the most profitable targets for mafia crews because millions of dollars in cargo passed through its warehouses every week. Trucks loaded with electronics, clothing, liquor, and cash shipments often became easy prey for well-organized theft operations. Within this environment, DeSimone quickly distinguished himself from other young associates. While many criminals relied on intimidation alone, DeSimone had a reputation for being willing to cross lines that others hesitated to approach. Those around him began to view him as a fearless enforcer, someone who could be trusted to handle situations that required absolute ruthlessness. Working under the influence of Jimmy Burke, a powerful associate connected to the Lucchese crime family, DeSimone became involved in increasingly sophisticated crimes that ranged from hijacking cargo trucks to enforcing debts and eliminating threats to the crew's operations. These activities generated enormous profits, and the group began building a reputation as one of the most aggressive criminal crews operating in New York's underworld. DeSimone's growing status was fueled by his willingness to act quickly and violently whenever conflict emerged. According to accounts later provided by Henry Hill, the young mob associate developed a chilling reputation. Arguments that started as small disputes could suddenly escalate into life-or-death situations when DeSimone was present. This reputation served two purposes within the mafia world. On one hand, it earned him respect among criminals who valued strength and fearlessness. On the other, it also made him unpredictable, a trait that sometimes made even experienced mob figures uneasy. Nevertheless, his loyalty to Burke's crew and his readiness to carry out dangerous assignments allowed him to move further into the inner circle of organized crime operations connected to the Lucchese network. By the mid-1970s, DeSimone had transformed from a reckless street criminal into a feared participant in a powerful criminal enterprise, one that controlled lucrative theft rings and maintained influence across several neighborhoods of New York City. Yet, as his reputation grew, so did the risks surrounding him, because the very violence that helped him rise inside the mafia would soon lead to a moment that changed everything. The moment that would permanently change Thomas DeSimone's fate began with an encounter that seemed, at first, like nothing more than a typical night inside a neighborhood bar in Brooklyn, New York. The man sitting across the room was William "Billy Bats" Bentvena, a respected member of the Lucchese crime family who had recently been released after serving 6 years in prison. In mafia culture, a made man, like Bats, held a protected status. No associate, no matter how ambitious or violent, was allowed to harm him without explicit approval from higher-ranking bosses. But DeSimone was never known for respecting limits. According to accounts later revealed by Henry Hill, the tension began when Bats started teasing DeSimone about his past, reportedly mocking him for once working as a shoeshine boy when he was younger. Inside the rigid hierarchy of the mafia, public humiliation could carry serious consequences, especially for someone with a volatile personality like DeSimone. What followed would later become one of the most infamous moments associated with the New York underworld. In a sudden explosion of rage, Thomas DeSimone allegedly attacked Billy Bats, beating him violently while others watched in shock. The assault did not stop there. Bats was reportedly taken away and killed, his body later hidden to erase the evidence. Inside the criminal world, however, secrets rarely stay hidden. The killing of a Lucchese soldier was not simply another act of violence. It was a direct violation of one of the most sacred rules of the mafia. Word of the incident began to circulate quietly among powerful figures in New York's 5 families. And with every retelling, the consequences became more serious for DeSimone. Rumors spread that senior members of the Lucchese organization were furious that an associate had crossed a line that even hardened criminals rarely dared to approach. Yet, despite the danger, DeSimone continued moving through the streets with the same reckless confidence that had defined his rise. To some people, he appeared unstoppable, a young gangster whose reputation for brutality made him both feared and admired. But behind the scenes, the fallout from that single moment was growing, and within the secretive power structure of the mafia, certain actions almost always lead to an inevitable response. The violent reputation that had once helped Thomas DeSimone climb the ranks was now beginning to transform into the very reason powerful men started asking a dangerous question. How long could someone like him be allowed to live. By the late 1970s, the crew surrounding Jimmy Burke had evolved into one of the most profitable criminal operations connected to the Lucchese crime family. And within that world, Thomas DeSimone had become a recognizable and feared presence. Their activities stretched across Queens, Brooklyn, and Long Island, but the real financial engine of the operation revolved around John F. Kennedy International Airport, where cargo theft had turned into a highly organized business. Trucks carrying expensive electronics, designer clothing, liquor shipments, and international freight regularly disappeared before they ever reached their destinations. Millions of dollars flowed through these schemes, and members of the crew began living far beyond what their official occupations could explain. DeSimone, still in his 20s, moved through this environment surrounded by criminals who enjoyed the rewards of a thriving underground economy. Expensive cars, late-night parties, cash payments, and constant movement between bars, clubs, and private gatherings formed the rhythm of their daily lives. But the most dramatic moment connected to this crew came in December 1978, when a group linked to Burke carried out what would become known as the Lufthansa Heist at JFK Airport, one of the largest cash robberies in American history at the time. Approximately $6 million in cash and jewelry vanished from the airline's cargo terminal, a staggering amount equivalent to more than $25 million today. Although the exact roles of each participant have long been debated, investigators later connected members of Burke's circle to the planning and aftermath of the robbery. Inside the criminal world, sudden wealth often created its own dangers. The massive haul drew the attention of federal investigators, and paranoia began spreading among those involved. According to later testimony, several individuals connected to the robbery were mysteriously killed in the months that followed, as leaders of the operation attempted to eliminate potential witnesses who might attract attention from the FBI. Within this tense environment, DeSimone continued to operate with the same reckless energy that had defined his earlier years. He was surrounded by wealth, influence, and the protection of powerful criminals. Yet the violence that had built his reputation still followed him everywhere he went. Rumors about the killing of Billy Batts had not disappeared, and in the shadowy world of organized crime, unresolved offenses rarely remain forgotten forever. As the crew celebrated the profits from the Lufthansa robbery, another silent calculation was unfolding behind closed doors. For powerful mafia figures concerned about discipline and reputation, the existence of someone as unpredictable as Thomas DeSimone was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore, and the consequences of his past actions were quietly moving closer with every passing day. By 1979, the story of Thomas DeSimone reached its most mysterious chapter, one that would ultimately define his legacy inside the American Mafia. Despite the wealth and influence surrounding the crew connected to Jimmy Burke, DeSimone had quietly become a liability in the eyes of powerful figures within the Lucchese crime family. The problem was not just his violent reputation, but the consequences of crossing one of the Mafia's most sacred rules: the killing of a made man, William "Billy Bats" Bentvena. In the rigid hierarchy of organized crime, such an act could not simply be ignored. It demanded a response to preserve authority and discipline within the family structure. According to multiple accounts from former mob associates, DeSimone had been hoping for a promotion within the organization, believing he might finally be made himself. Instead, the invitation he reportedly received would lead him somewhere far more dangerous. In January 1979, DeSimone left to attend what he believed was a meeting connected to his long-awaited induction into the Mafia. He never returned. Friends and associates soon realized something had gone terribly wrong. But in the world of organized crime, asking questions about a disappearance could be just as dangerous as knowing the answer. Investigators later concluded that DeSimone had almost certainly been killed shortly after arriving at the meeting. Some accounts suggest the order came directly from leaders inside the Lucchese family seeking revenge for the death of Billy Batts. Other theories claim that Jimmy Burke himself may have played a role in arranging the killing, possibly fearing that DeSimone's unpredictable behavior and violent history were attracting too much attention from law enforcement. The exact location of his death remains unknown, and his body has never been found. With his disappearance, the man who once terrified people across New York's criminal underworld vanished as if he had never existed. Yet the legend surrounding him did not fade. His story eventually inspired the character Tommy DeVito in the film Goodfellas, a portrayal that captured the volatile personality that had made DeSimone both feared and infamous. In the end, the rise and fall of Thomas DeSimone revealed a brutal truth about the Mafia. Power, money, and fear could elevate a man quickly, but breaking the organization's rules almost always carried the same final consequence. The life of Thomas DeSimone remains one of the most chilling examples of how the Mafia could create and destroy its own legends. In the streets of New York, he rose from a reckless young criminal to a feared enforcer connected to the powerful Lucchese crime family, earning a reputation that even seasoned gangsters treated with caution. His world was filled with money from cargo theft, influence inside Mafia crews, and the thrill of living above the law. Yet that same world demanded absolute obedience to its rules. For a time, DeSimone seemed untouchable, moving through bars, clubs, and criminal operations with the confidence of someone who believed his violent reputation would protect him forever. But the Mafia was never a place where chaos could exist without consequences. The killing of Billy Batts, a respected made member of the organization, created a silent countdown that DeSimone either ignored or never fully understood. When he disappeared in 1979 at just 28 years old, the man who once inspired fear across the underworld became another unsolved mystery buried inside Mafia history. No trial, no grave, no official record of the final moments. Only rumors whispered among criminals and investigators trying to piece together what really happened that night. Today, his story survives partly because it inspired the unforgettable character in Goodfellas, reminding audiences that the truth behind many Mafia legends is often darker than the movies portray. The rise of Thomas DeSimone shows how quickly power and violence can elevate someone in the criminal world. But his disappearance reveals an even harsher reality. Inside organized crime, even the most feared men can vanish without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a name in the shadows of history.